Wherever you're joining us, welcome. We are the Appreciative Recovery Show. We believe in the power of curiosity, self-compassion, and connection. My name is Kelly Knox. I am the host of this show. And today's guests are Jennifer Carey and Dana Wood. They are the founders of IC3 Consulting. It's a firm that brings mind science to the workplace to improve employee engagement. Dana and Jennifer both hold master's degrees and specialist degrees in counselor education. Dana is visiting us from warm St. Petersburg, Florida. Welcome back, Jennifer, and welcome to the show, Dana.
Thank you.
First, will the both of you tell our audience what IC3 is, why it's innovative, and how it helps the bottom line of companies? Just kind of briefly cover all of it.
Just a little bit.
Just a little bit.
You want to?
Sure. I think we should start with our name. So the 3 ICs stand for the outcome of what we wish to bring to companies. So the first IC is insightful company. So with awareness and alignment, we help the company become an insightful company.
And the second piece of this formula is creativity and communication, which helps create innovative collaboration.
And then our last IC is intentional culture, which we get through employee engagement and kind of a culmination of everything. So if people are aligned with the mission and they feel connected, then it is an intentional culture, all moving in the same direction.
That sounds very interesting.
Yes.
So in a few minutes we'll zoom in on that.
Yes.
And last month you were with us, Jennifer.
Yes.
And told the audience a little bit about, how you came into this work. And you can go back to appreciativerecovery.org to watch that show. Dana, tell our audience a little bit about yourself and what brings you to this kind of work.
Sure. I think it begins in graduate school. And do you want to share that piece, and then I'll tell more about it?
Yes. So how Dana and I started, we were in graduate school, and during one of our breaks, we went to Granada, Spain, which was amazing. And here we were in grad school learning about relationships, human dynamics, development, all of these skills that when we were on this trip in Spain and on buses, we were like, what if we brought these skills to corporations? What if we brought these skills to businesses? And that's where the dream started. We literally were drawing maps and saying what it could do for the community if we could bring these skills to companies. But then our lives went into different directions, and that's where, if you want to bring up your story.
Jen came to Boston, and I was in New York. And in New York, in graduate school, I had been studying creativity, and the University of Florida has an amazing program called Arts and Medicine. And I just became fascinated. And so in New York, which is like the mecca of art therapy and one of the homes of expressive arts therapy, I did additional training up there and just felt like I found a home in what I was learning. And so really took all that training and tried to bring it into where I was working. And they were like, sure, you can do that if you do your other job as well. You can bring that in. And so I was working with the grant writer there, and I had to get clear on why this worked. And so that's when I started learning more about the brain science behind why creativity is so important for humans.
Right. So let's talk a little bit about the creativity.
Okay.
Now, on your website, you have this great blog that I believe compares coffee to, what does it compare to?
Creativity.
Creativity and coffee.
And the creativity cycle compared to an amazing cup of coffee.
And you pose the question, go ahead, you tell me.
Dana wrote that one, so I'm going to let you talk about that one.
So I think as adults, not as children, as adults, we get trained out of our innate creative abilities. And so all humans are creative. We had to be, our ancestors had to be in order to survive. So creativity is hardwired into our brains.
Right.
So the question really is, how are you creative?
Not are you creative?
Right.
That's how the blog goes. Not
Yeah.
are you creative, but
How?
how are you creative? Because we all are creative, you're saying.
Exactly.
Everyone.
Exactly.
It might not be that you are an amazing painter or drawer. That's normally how we begin to limit creativity. And so it's really, in my mind, if you can learn the different stages of creativity, you can understand the process, because it looks different in each stage. And if you know sort of where you are, you can know what's coming next and prepare yourself for that.
Right. All right, so that kind of sets the stage for, let's dive deeper into how you bring this to the companies that you work with. And go ahead, speak a little bit to that.
So our services, if you just speak about our services, we do corporate retreats and ongoing trainings and executive coaching. And our mission really is to bring creativity, collaboration, a lot of these, what they call soft skills, to corporations. And then that will create a highly engaged culture and people who feel a sense of purpose in their work and they feel connected. And it's where people spend most of their time, right? You spend most of your time at work. It's full of humans. Let's talk about human skills. Let's talk about the brain science to support it, because we are all going in with our brains. And so we basically customize these services to whatever the company may be challenged with, to whatever their strengths are, to create different activities and things that can cause this or inspire this creativity and connection.
And why we work within corporations. So Jennifer and I have background in a few different settings, including major nonprofits, like large, that function like corporations, as well as higher ed, which function like big bureaucracies as well. And with doing this grant writing and trying to bring in programs which we knew would be helpful, like truly impactful, it would always be, well, we need to find the money, so we need to write grants to these larger corporations and ask for the money. And it's like, why don't we just work with the major corporations and begin to have impact there? So it can have this further reach. So that is why we chose to work specifically with corporations.
Right. How do you, so businesses, in my mind, kind of have this culture of, they work from this, from the mind. Okay, we're talking about the mind, we're talking about mind science. So they work from this cognitive place. And there's some organizations that can be a little bit harsh and don't bring emotion to work, right? So I've always heard that, leave your problems at home. And it sounds to me, tell me if I'm wrong, that you're kind of trying to use your word, integrate how emotions, cognition all work in the workplace. So talk to me a little bit about that.
Well, one thing I want to mention on that note, Kelly, is you're exactly right. They may not always know how to look at the emotions, but what they will look at is if they have a high turnover, so they're not keeping good employees. They have, perhaps maybe they know that they have a workplace bully. They know that there's something going on. Maybe they don't. They just know that there's people who are leaving or darting or not producing as much. What are some other pain points that I'm leaving out?
The costs of burnout, illness, absenteeism, just not showing up to work, and poor customer satisfaction. I mean, these are all affecting the bottom line. And so if you can meet corporations where they are, what's affecting the bottom line, and help them learn, okay, these are often an indicator of your workforce, your employees not being fully engaged. Let's look at why and how to engage them, which is getting into more of these soft skills or the emotional piece.
Right. And kind of earlier, one of you the way you were talking, that maybe these aren't, because you put the quotes around it, maybe these aren't soft skills. You know, how do you work with organizations to engage their employees, to integrate this type of, how do you change their minds around this?
Well, we do look at data,
Yeah.
as well as bring in the brain science to show why this is important from really the inside out.
Right. So, Dana, I know brain science is your thing. So, talk to our audience a little bit about some brain science that,
Sure.
that fits into what you're trying to do with organizations.
Sure. I bring out my hand puppet
Okay.
because I know I'm like, one of my true heroes is Dr. Daniel Siegel, and he brings out the hand puppet, and if he can, I can.
Okay.
So his model of the brain, and this is admittedly pretty simplified because the brain really obviously is quite complex and interactive, but this gives a sense of how the brain evolved and why we behave sometimes in the way we do, which isn't always from our cortex. So imagine this is the brain, and this is the brain stem connected to that spinal cord or our bodies. And this is, so between the brain stem and this limbic area, which is sort of the interior of our brain, there's the amygdala, and there's been lots of conversation around the amygdala, the fight, flight, or freeze response. And this limbic system is what we share with other mammals. So the reptilian, this is the reptilian brain, the brain stem, automatic behaviors such as heart rate and breath. This limbic system is what we share with other mammals. It is where deep-seated emotion, learning takes place, memory, and then we have this cortex area, makes us human. And the cortex is divided in two hemispheres, the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere. And the right hemisphere, empathy, creativity housed, is directly connected to this limbic system, which in turn is directly connected to the rest of our body. This left hemisphere, which is more analytical and language is housed here, is not. And so if we can find inroads into this right hemisphere, we're connecting to a lot of information that isn't always accessible just by talking about it. And so when we talk a little bit more about creativity, I can share why that's so important. And you better believe advertisers know this. So they tantalize us with images all the time that drives all this. But if we can actually bring it to consciousness, we can work intentionally with it rather than it just being this drive that we don't know where it's coming from. But so the foundation of our work is creating safety. So the need of the brain stem is safety. If we cannot get beyond safety, we can never access these higher mental functions. So that's where we start with every company assessing, is there safety and trust here? And if not, let's find methods to implement that.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I did not know that the, to use your hand puppet,
Yeah.
I didn't know that the emotional, the empathy and that was actually connected to the
Limbic.
limbic, and the cognition is separate from that.
Exactly.
That's very interesting.
And this is how we're mostly functioning.
It is true.
We're always in our left brain.
This is generally thought of as prized, right?
Yeah,
Oh,
absolutely.
You
We're
can
sort of these
get
walking
things
left
done,
brains.
and you can
And-
do your to-dos. And
Right. To veer a little bit. So advertisers know that this is true. This is connected, and they manipulate us. They do. And if we're not conscious of what's going on here, anybody can. So I don't know. Talk a little bit about that.
I think we try to approach it from a much more constructive direction, in that companies can innovate. And even deeper than that, and of course of what is my heart, is that people can find their expression and their creativity and bring that to a mission and to a product and to a system in a company. And that's of course what makes me get all excited, because then people feel that sense of purpose that we all long for.
Right.
So that's kind of how I don't really see them as manipulating the public, but,
Advertisers. I didn't say organizations, although I'm certain that does happen. But
well, what can be so delightful is, for instance, one example is when we went into a company, and the second day of our activities, we were able to really get into this creative space because we had set the foundation and made it really safe to enter this right brain, which feels very different in a business setting because we're not used to going into that really playful, curious. I know that's part of your mission. And so we helped prep them, but when they got there, they were surprised by what they were actually able to come up with as a result. And one individual said, I have not laughed this hard since I was a child. And to be able to have that sort of bonding experience with your teammates was truly priceless.
Yeah, that actually gave me the chills. That's a beautiful thing. And
humor is also here.
Yeah, is it?
Yeah.
It's very interesting. So let's talk a little more about psychological safety and how you incorporate that into not only the work that you do, but how you help the organizations incorporate that into the culture of the workforce.
Yeah. Whenever we start any kind of work, whether it's just coming in for a meeting or an ongoing training or retreat, we establish group agreements. So these are agreements for everyone. And those agreements include minimizing hierarchy, effective communication, so learning how to listen and speak so people feel heard and valued. Trusting the process, a big one for us is because we all want to judge, which then causes these obstacles. So everyone kind of deferring judgment of each other, of yourself.
So you set these as ground rules when you go in.
These are ground rules that we repeat to they're like, oh really, we're going to go through this again? But we do, because it just reminds everyone of these grounds, this foundation of a place where everyone can feel safe.
And they seem rather intuitive at first. However, again, it's really important that they're clear. We say it, yes, these may seem simple. Simple's not always easy, especially when there's conflict or tension and friction. And in the creative process, there's going to be, it's part of it, and where actually new things can be born from. So expect it and prepare for it now when it does seem simple.
Right.
So we have everyone practice these speaker and listener roles and tools.
Right. One of the other things that we spoke about, in conversations off camera, is the importance of transparency to this safety, right? And all joking aside, transparency in not feeling manipulated, right? Because you can feel manipulated in the workplace. And so talk a little bit about how the importance of transparency and what you share and what you don't share and what you share that you're not sharing as you guys.
An example I love to give, we have the work bully example where if you have, no, I'm not going to go down that one yet, but let's talk about your fear of whether or not you're going to have a job. So let's talk about the threat of you see someone get laid off in your department. So suddenly you're not sure if you're going to be able to get your bread for your family. So just
survival.
Just to bring up the brain again. So now we have someone operating from here at work, right?
Cannot get here.
Cannot optimize and produce and do all the things that you want to have. We have someone working in fight or flight every time they go into work because they're not even sure if they're going to have their job. All it takes is one conversation that's either we're not letting go of anyone else. We had to let go of that person, for reasons that are business, but understand your job is safe. Even if they only know it's safe for the next 5 months, they've just relaxed that person enough, given them enough information, enough transparency that they don't have to worry about being blindsided in any way.
Right.
That's just one example.
Right.
And it's amazing how many employees we've spoken to where that conversation hasn't happened, and so they just don't know when the next shoe is going to drop.
Right.
So
and
obviously are not
what
investing.
if the next shoe is going to drop? The business, the leaders know that the next shoe will drop. How would you recommend the leader deal with that?
Transparency. I know that they have to look at it from a business way, but we would talk with them openly about how we can meet and how they can talk about enough information that isn't going to jeopardize them, but that gives that person enough information to feel safe, and that they either need to look or they can make the choice. You know what, I'm going to stay in risk. I'm going to take the risk and stay here, even though they're telling me X, Y, and Z. But just to have that known, that's what people are seeking for, because our minds, as we know, and especially if we're in that fight or flight, we can dream up a ton of scenarios that may not even be one of the possibilities.
I'm the queen of that.
Oh yeah, we're catastrophizing or disastrous, like, yeah, a lot of people are the king and queens of that. So if they can just hush that.
Right. So another thing that we spoke about is why organizations. So you could be doing this kind of work on a community basis. You guys can be in family practice, working with any kind of dynamics, group dynamics. Why organizations, and how does that ripple out?
So we are both practicing therapists with private practices.
Okay.
So we do work with individuals and groups, and we work with these larger corporations.
I know we tapped a little bit in the beginning about it, but there's a bigger picture here about organizations and what that means.
Well, there is a lot of power, of course, in businesses and organizations. So, of course, there's that. I know for me, I feel like it's covering the masses. It's covering a lot of people and the ripple effect of that. For example, we bring in skills. Let's just talk about the communication skills. Suddenly, that executive or employee brings that skill home to their relationships in their family. They're using these listening and speaking skills with their family. Suddenly they bring it to school, they bring it to the community. I feel like it's a ripple effect that just can cover far more people in a far more faster and effective way.
Right, yeah, I totally can see that as well.
And if we can start to shift the culture within organizations to be more responsive rather than reactive, I think that can be impactful and meaningful for society at large.
Right.
Because they do drive a lot of society.
There's a lot of power, yeah, and I think this is brilliant. The great work that you guys are doing. Is there anything that I didn't ask, that we didn't cover, that you would like our audience to know about the work that you do?
Do you want to share a bit about awareness and mindfulness?
It's similar to what we were just saying. So we do work a lot on awareness when we work with organizations. And it's not only awareness of self, it's awareness of others. And we do bring in mindfulness, and a lot of organizations like Google and Intel and even Aetna are bringing in mindfulness and that pause and that practice of gaining self-awareness. I think the other advantage of that is all of the realizations that you gain in becoming a more self-aware individual, aware of your strengths, aware of the areas that you want to work on, and the compassion that you can bring into that process, which is one of your missions. That if you can gain awareness about the areas you need to work on or your vulnerabilities, you can learn from them, and you can also teach that to your employees, and how that can create for personal and individual development is really powerful.
Right, and it adds to the safety.
It adds to the safety.
And I think mindfulness certainly is becoming more well known. Maybe in a few sectors it still has this woo-woo factor, but it's really just about being conscious, being awake, being aware of our own reactivity and schemas, and that's not always easy work, but extremely important work. And I think when you break it down in that way, we aren't being manipulated as well, because you're like, oh, I'm aware that sensation, because I'm actually in my body, I'm not just this like walking left brain. I'm aware of what that sensation is in my body. I know that's something being triggered. Pause, and I can be responsive, intentional around that.
Right, which seems kind of rewarding. Yeah.
and just the optimization of self and your creative expression and your sense of connection, which is another one of your mission, and like connection to yourself, connection to each other. You got excited.
I got really excited because because through this evolution of the brain, which is, you know, very much about me down here, my needs being met, my survival. When you reach these higher mental functions, it's about we. It's no longer, like, the need of the cortex is connection.
Right.
And not just connection with others, but connection with something even larger, such as environment.
You're right, right, right. Right, well, I want to thank you too. I can talk about this all day.
I know.
And I really appreciate you joining us on the show today. And if you would like to learn more about the work that Dana and Jennifer do, you can go to their website, which is www.ic3consulting.com, right? And you can get some more information about what they do, read some of their great blogs. You can also go to Appreciative Recovery website, which is www.appreciativerecovery.org, and I'll have the link to their website on it, and some information that they may send me. And you can sign up for our monthly newsletters. And again, thank you for joining us, and thank you guys for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Kelly.